Every day, you make decisions: what to buy, who to trust, what to believe. But here's the real question. Are those decisions really yours? Or are they designed? This channel breaks down the psychology behind everything. I'm Shrest, and this is where we decode the world.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a story that, honestly, still blows my mind a little bit. We're going to unpack how a private gift, literally a digital love letter built between two people, became one of the fastest viral phenomena in the entire history of the internet. And the wildest part? It happened without a single marketing tactic, no growth hacking, and absolutely no ads. Let's kick things off with this number right here, 90. On November 1st, 2021, exactly 90 people played this quiet, incredibly simple web game, just a few dozen folks scattered around. For a game that was about to take over the world, its entire user base on day one could literally fit inside a tiny university classroom. But then, just weeks later, we're talking early January 2022, that number absolutely exploded to over 2 million daily players. What's so incredible about this growth is just how vertical it was. It wasn't some gradual, steady climb. It was a sudden, seismic, global obsession that seemed to happen overnight. So the massive question we're answering today is how on earth did a private love letter become a multi-million-dollar viral phenomenon? We're going to trace this timeline to review the completely accidental behavioral psychology that drove this unprecedented growth. Because what happened here wasn't magic, and it definitely wasn't fueled by some massive marketing budget. It was pure, unadulterated human psychology. Section 1. A game for one person. To really understand this explosive growth, we've got to rewind back to the deep isolation of the January 2021 lockdown. Software engineer Josh Wordle dusted off an old 2013 prototype. He wasn't trying to build the next big tech startup, he just wanted to create a daily puzzle purely to entertain his partner, Palak Shah. They were stuck at home, they'd gotten genuinely hooked on the New York Times spelling bee and crosswords, and he thought, well, what if I built something clean and minimal, just for us? Now, the game needed some serious tweaking before it could become the hit we know today. The original 2013 prototype had about 12,000 five-letter words, including some incredibly obscure ones that nobody had ever heard of. But Palak herself made this massive editorial contribution. She went through all 12,000 words and manually filtered them down to roughly 2,500 everyday, commonly recognized words. This single editorial decision is honestly one of the most underrated reasons the game became accessible to the masses, instead of just appealing to hardcore dictionary buffs. At its core, this whole thing was just a digital love letter. Palak even told The Times, "This is definitely how Josh shows his love." For 6 whole months, from January to June 2021, they were the only 2 players on Earth playing this game. It was just a private morning ritual, charmingly named Wordle, as a simple little pun on Wordle's own last name. Section 2. The quiet public spread. Since they were having so much fun with it, the game started this really quiet, totally organic spread in June of 2021. First, it hit a family WhatsApp group, where it quickly became an obsession for Wordle's relatives. Then it rippled out to close friends. Finally, he decided to just launch it publicly on his personal website in October 2021. What is absolutely crucial to note here is the total lack of a growth strategy. It was completely free, no ads, not in an app store, and you didn't even need an account to play. It just lived on a basic web page, exactly as it has existed for just the 2 of them. Section 3. The emoji tipping point. Then, the real historical turning point hit in November 2021, and it was sparked by a small group of friends over in New Zealand. They'd figured out this clever workaround. They were manually typing out colored square emojis on Twitter to recreate their daily grid. It let them show off their gray, yellow, and green results without actually spoiling the word for anyone else. Wordle noticed this organic behavior and brilliantly decided to just build the emoji sharing generator right directly into the game. This simple little feature unlocks some seriously deep psychology. It perfectly tapped into Jonah Berger's concept of social currency, which basically says people share things that make them look good to others, especially when it requires 0 extra effort. Wordle's emoji-grid gave players this effortless, spoiler-free way to visually flex their intelligence to their entire social network with just a single tap. And when you combine that with Robert Cialdini's principle of social proof, the explosion makes complete sense. When your entire Twitter feed fills up with identical colored boxes every single morning, your brain instantly registers it as, oh wow, everyone is already doing this. Not participating suddenly feels like you're missing out on a massive cultural moment. Those 1.2 million grids shared on Twitter in early January created an irresistible FOMO that brought millions of new players crashing onto the site.
Section 4. The Psychology of Scarcity.
But wait, sharing alone doesn't explain why people kept coming back day after day. Most successful apps want you scrolling endlessly, right? They want infinite content. Well, Wordle intentionally broke that golden rule, relying instead on the scarcity effect. This is the psychological principle where we consistently assign a higher perceived value to things that are limited in availability. By restricting players to just one identical puzzle a day, for basically 3 minutes, Wordle transformed a standard word game into a highly anticipated global ritual.
Inside that tiny 3-minute window, it delivered these perfectly calibrated dopamine hits. Every single guess gives you instant visual feedback. The unpredictable flip of those gray, yellow, and green tiles, that directly mirrors B.F. Skinner's variable reward patterns. It's kind of like a slot machine. Plus, the difficulty sits right in a psychological flow state. It requires just 4 to 6% more skill than your current ability, making it super satisfying instead of frustrating. Add in those double-digit streak counters, and the psychological cost of skipping even one day becomes incredibly high.
Section 5. The NYT Acquisition. So, by early 2022, this tiny non-commercial game was pulling in nearly 10 million daily players. Naturally, the major suitors came knocking. In January 2022, in a perfectly fitting full-circle moment, the New York Times, the exact company whose games inspired Wordle in the first place, acquired it for an undisclosed low seven-figure sum. And interestingly enough, Wordle actually negotiated to keep his own personal portfolio domain completely out of the deal. Today, Wordle is a massive gateway, acting as the primary driver for the New York Times' 980,000 puzzle subscriptions.
I absolutely love this quote from Josh Wordle when he announced the sale. He said, "The game has gotten bigger than I ever imagined," which I suppose isn't that much of a feat given I made the game for an audience of 1. Just a staggering leap from a private lockdown activity to a global phenomenon. It brought an incredible amount of joy, sparking friendly rivalries and connecting people. But Wordle also admitted that managing a viral sensation completely by himself brought an overwhelming amount of pressure. Section 6. The Uncopyable Secret. Ever since that monumental acquisition, countless marketers and developers have tried to reverse engineer Wordle's viral mechanics. And guess what? Almost all of them have failed. Why? Because of a fundamental difference in intent. Typical app design asks, how do we maximize engagement and retention? But Wordle's design asked, how do I make something genuinely lovely for one person? At scale, those two questions might produce similar psychological mechanics, but audiences instinctively sense the difference. You simply cannot manufacture genuine restraint. We all know the difference between a product engineered to hack our attention and one built purely out of care.
So the next time you're building something, ask yourself, does it need to be engineered to perform, or does it just need total, genuine honesty? The ultimate takeaway from the whole Wordle phenomenon is that sometimes the most powerful psychology in the world isn't manipulation or growth hacking or artificial virality. Sometimes the real secret to reaching millions is simply restraint, simplicity, and building something completely true for just one person. If you can do that well enough, the millions will recognize it when they see it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this sparks a new way of thinking for your next big idea.
You think about power, identity, and how situations shape who we are? Subscribe.